My shift guest today is Reverend David Maginley. David lives in my community of Halifax, Nova Scotia, and his reputation preceded him before we actually got to meet. It seemed that if I was having a conversation and the topic of spirituality came up, that someone would say, "Do you know David Maginley?" And I would say no. And always they would say, "He's had a near-death experience," which puts him in a kind of elite category in certain circles. David is a spiritual care practitioner, an award-winning speaker and author, a 4-time cancer survivor. And I love, David, that your branding is in your bookshelf behind you. You have your 2 books, Beyond Surviving.
Yeah, so there's
book. Yes, that was your first book. And your latest book is Early Exits, which relates to the career path that you have chosen, because not only are you a minister, a pastor in the Lutheran community, but you've devoted your life to, shall we say, cancer care, hospice, palliative care. And on a lighter note, there are cameras in your bookcase, and I know of your love of photography, your work with the famous, in New Brunswick anyway, photographer Freeman Patterson, and you're actually doing a 1-week retreat with Freeman. When's that, David?
That's in June. How lucky am I to work with that man? It explores creativity and spirituality. So it's really broad and really deep. Lots of fun.
Well, I heard you speak about, I think you did it last year as well. And I know that it, as much as you give to the participants, that it also, being with Freeman, feeds your soul, shall we say, as well. So it sounds like a beautiful experience, and I can certainly put the link to that if there are any spaces left.
Yes, we have a few spaces left, so it would be lovely if you do that. Thank you.
Awesome. So because people are so fascinated by the near-death experience thing, I thought we could start with that, because as we talked about earlier, I think that in a way shapes what you've been doing for the past 25 years.
Oh my goodness, it shaped my entire life, right? My entire career as a minister, and my complete understanding of who and what I am as a human being having this experience, right? So that near-death experience was a result of my second round with cancer. I've had cancer 4 times. And in the second type, the second cycle, I died. Fortunately, I died in a hospital chapel. That's a good place to die. You got all the bases covered, right? And there were doctors and there were nurses in the chapel, along with other people and patients and their family members. But my cancer makes this, makes all these chemicals, catecholamines, norepinephrine. And when I get nervous, right, my adrenal gland activates, and that triggers the tumor to blow. So it's just like a time bomb. Really dangerous cancer. Fortunately, if you can say, people die quickly from this cancer. It's not a long drawn out process. It usually takes about 30 seconds and then you're dead, because the tumor explodes and you have basically a massive heart attack, and all this adrenaline or chemicals flood into your system. Now, nothing initiates the adrenal gland and the fight or flight or anxiety response, quite like public speaking. And so every Sunday, I was taking my life into my hands without really knowing it. I didn't understand what this tumor was doing to me. The first one was when I was 17 years old, and it was in my bladder. So the chemicals it produced didn't go into my bloodstream. They just flushed out. But the second one was on my femoral artery. So it was on the superhighway in my bloodstream. And so I got a little anxious. I felt sweaty. I felt nervous. And then I felt nothing. I was gone before I hit the floor, which is a good thing because it's a long way down, right? I'm 6'8", and it's a hard floor. So I was gone, and I found myself. Unlike most people, like you hear many near-death experiences where you're first floating above your body and looking down. Others don't have that transition point or go through a tunnel. I suddenly found myself on a grassy hill, and there was a tree at the top of the hill, which is why there are trees on the front of my book, both books. And I could feel that tree and its branches drinking in the light, and I could feel the light around me flowing through me, and it was a grassy hill. So it was a recognizable environment. Does that mean it was presented to me in a way I could comprehend? Likely. But I suddenly felt transformed into wonder and joy. I was happier than I've ever experienced in my life. And one of the fascinating aspects of it, which took me decades to unravel, usually it takes about 10 years for an adult to integrate a near-death experience. You move from this level of consciousness to one so expansive, and then you're compressed back into this. And what you were or experienced and what you comprehended and integrate, what you had become is too big. So it gets pushed down into the subconscious, and it takes a long time to be integrated. So I found that there, I didn't have an ego and a persona. I didn't have a subconscious. I didn't have any fractured aspect of my identity. I was completely integrated. There was no part of me that was suppressed and that I was unaware of. And that meant I was complete and I was whole, and I was not fractured. So I believe that this is why so many people say that they felt that they were home. And it was an experience of self without any judgment, including from me. So I was completely happy, and felt every blade of grass, felt that tree, felt the light, felt the clouds in the sky. I was one with it all, and yet I was still myself. That I find that really fascinating.
It is.
I didn't lose my personality, but I did lose my ego.
Did you lose your body?
No, I
Oh.
was still me.
You had a sense of having a body. Could you see
yes,
your
I
body?
would.
You saw your body.
Well, see is a term that's understandable here in this level of consciousness, but there, see falls far too short. But I was me. I was walking, so I had legs, and as I recall it and move back to it, I know I was human as I am here. So for all intents and purposes, I had a body, but not quite like this. And I wasn't alone. There was a companion there, a guide, someone who welcomed me. It was a masculine figure. And if you were to ask me what he looked like, I couldn't describe him in physical terms, but he felt like my best friend. He was joy and peace and love and compassion and great authority and power and great you put it into words. he was very familiar to me. I felt like he'd known me all my life, and I'd known him.
Mm. Mm.
So,
Oh, do you put a label on that? I
um,
know from what you've said even that, words are so inadequate in many ways, but do you put a label on what let's call it that essence?
a lot of people say, well, David, that sounds like Jesus. Compassion, authority, love, unconditional love, friendship. Yes, indeed. Maybe it was Jesus, but I tend to not think they're going to send the big guy to meet me. I joke that it was a junior apprentice from the warehouse, right? Uh, what I'm trying to say is it doesn't matter specifically. I mean, he was as infused with the character of Jesus as anything, right? So to be in Christ is to be love itself, right? Because if the Christ is God and God is love, then it's all love, right? Or was it an angel? What matters is not the label, but the relationship.
Mm.
And it was um, it was a love that totally opens my heart and totally connects me to a feeling of authenticity and utter safety, even in this realm. Right? I'm not consistent with that. I'm always bumbling along, but I can just, and I'm feeling it now, I can just go back to that memory and it lives in me like it happened yesterday, even though it happened 30 plus years ago.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. And yes, I could feel that you were going there in your, shall we call it mind?
Oh boy,
Your
yes.
energy. Yeah, in your mind you can connect with. The term quantum moment comes to me. It's like that moment where at some level you know everything, but you said it took years to bring it down to the level that maybe you can talk about it a bit. Were you able to talk about it right away, or did it take time?
Oh my goodness, no. I didn't talk about it for many years.
Mm.
I suppressed it
Mm.
because when you're back, you've got to choose between the reality you're in or the one you touched upon, and this is the one you got to deal with.
Mm.
And the rational mind, the level of thought that we function at, cannot, it is incapable of comprehending and processing this higher level of consciousness.
Mm.
So there's no way to integrate it rationally. It's done laterally, it's done through creativity, through silence, through abiding, through vulnerability, through surrender, through trust, through faith.
Mm.
Um,
Faith in what?
faith in love, faith in that what you see is not what you get
Say
and
more
not
about
what they
that.
want.
What you see is not what you get. What does that mean?
I see you through the visual apparatus of my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I see you only in the visible spectrum of light. But I know that beyond that are so many vibrations of reality moving from, to the radio waves and television frequencies, ultra, gamma, and infrared, and the whole spectrum
Mm-hmm.
of the electromagnetic field.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the apparatus to comprehend that. So what I can perceive and what I can touch actually makes up about 0.004% of all of reality, according to science.
Science.
So what I see is not what I get. What I see and what I experience is actually greatly distorted by my biological apparatus to facilitate only one thing, which is biological survival.
Mm-hmm.
If I were able to perceive reality as it is, or, even like 10% of the electromagnetic spectrum and the frequencies of consciousness, then I would be so easily distracted I'd get hit by a car. It does not serve our survival and functioning on the material level. But there, independent of the biological filters and the reducing valve of my brain, right, which filters consciousness to a trickle, resulting in me and all of my ridiculousness. There, I was open. I don't think 100%, but certainly a great deal more than I am now, to that underlying consciousness from which reality emanates and by which it is sustained.
Well said. Well said. So our physical eyes filter out in a maybe misguided attempt to keep us safe in the physical world.
I think it's a necessary distortion,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't need to be this narrow, because I know people who can see the electromagnetic field or aura around others. I've seen it 2 or 3 times. I certainly know that people can perceive information about others and communication, consciousness to consciousness, pure states. Telepathy is actually very common, and non-ordinary states of consciousness are very common. I know that you placed me in the elite club because I had a near-death experience, but 1 in 10 people who have a brush with death will have a near-death experience. 1 in 5 people who have a cardiac episode will have one. That's just North American culture. Millions upon millions upon millions of people have had them. And in my work in the hospital, I heard stories every week because I'm working with the dying. And it's utterly sublime. And while transcendent and extraordinary, it's not uncommon. I believe it is a universal phenomenon throughout all of humanity, and it goes back through all cultures and time periods, independent of belief system, right? And language or intelligence or level of education or level of maturity. In fact, children tend to have them much more than adults do.
Mm-hmm. That kind of makes sense. That kind of makes sense. So, David, would you say that this brush with quote unquote death has left you less fearful of death?
It certainly left me homesick. Yeah,
Do you ever
I'm not
question why you're still here?
yeah, I'm not afraid of death at all.
No, I know. Yeah.
Dying, I have issues with, right? We all want a smooth, comfortable death. That's most of the time not in the cards. I've been with hundreds of people as they've died. And even with good medical management, there's turbulence at times. Most of that turbulence is existential. The
Which
physical
means?
turbulence, it's a disruption in the integrity of a person's identity. Because let's remember who and what I am in the world, my role in my job, my family, my role in my community, my relationship to myself, my body, my language, my culture, right? This is the clothing of ego identity, who I temporarily think I am in the world. Well, that all gets deconstructed through suffering, especially into the dying process, because now you can no longer be who you were at work. You can't work. And you can't function in the family like you used to. You're more dependent on others. And then life gets eroded away until you are the body in the bed, relying on others to feed you, to clean you, to turn you. And many people dread that, of course.
Well,
But
not
they're
only
not
for
real.
themselves, but for their family.
Yeah, for their
Putting
loved
their
ones.
families in that position, right?
So they phrase that as the burden of care, which is, I can understand that term, but honestly, it's not, it's misguided.
So what would you call it? The
The
privilege?
honor, the
Yeah.
honor of caring. Uh, when both of my parents died, we were the ones who cared for them to the end. And it deepened our humanity. It amplified our love. It calibrated us to our own mortality. It woke us up to the gift of an ordinary day. In that vulnerability, it created more intimacy and bonding between us. We found that our parents, and my mom died of dementia over many years. My father died of pancreatic cancer rather quickly, about 3 weeks. Both of them, in their dying, taught us the ultimate lessons a parent could ever impart to their child. Those lessons include how not to abandon suffering, how to be embedded in the moment, how to be compassionate and tender with yourself as much as you are for your mom or your dad or your loved one, how to pull upon the resources of community and not do it alone, how to say the four most important words: thank you, love you, forgive me, goodbye. Oh, did I do that with my hand gestures?
You must have. Somebody's celebrating those words, David.
Oh,
Wow, we got
thanks.
balloons.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
What a moment. Wow,
So,
you're feeling it and I'm feeling it too. That's beautiful. Wow.
Sheila, this is what my near-death experience taught me. Because that angelic being and I had a conversation on the hill. I said, I'm so happy to be here. I'm home. I'm home. Let's run to the tree. Come on. Last one, there's a rotten egg.
Let's party.
Yeah. And he said, it's so good to see you, David, but we need to talk. You can't go up to the tree, which was interesting. In so many near-death experiences, the tree, or there's a horizon, or there's a line, or there's certainly some abstract point that you cannot cross. Because if you do, you're not coming back. And you're not permitted to cross. And for me, it was the tree at the top of the hill. So we walked and talked and reflected on my life. And basically, he said, it's great to see you. You're doing really well. Things are going good, but you got a lot of work to do. So you got to go back. You can't stay here. And I said, that's ridiculous. Why would I go back? I'm here. I'm home. I'm staying.
Mhm.
I got to get to that tree, but I couldn't run to the tree. Right? The power of his presence compelled me. Like it had me. I couldn't run from the conversation. And when I realized I wasn't going to win the argument, my heart sank. Right. So I was able to feel sorrow, longing, even in that state. So, I mean, what does that mean? I think it means that it's a lot more complicated on the afterlife than we realize. That there's continued growth and development, and that longing is still there. It's the echo of love's home in my heart.
Beautiful.
So he put his hand on my shoulder and he poured even more love and compassion into me, and I felt it. And he said, it's going to be okay. We will be with you. We'll see you later.
See you later. See you later.
In
So
30 years.
some days you go, when?
Oh, I do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? So do you think that there's some sort of, well, I'm using the phrase divine timing around death? Yeah.
In fact, I believe that there are no mistakes. Nothing is ever lost. No pain we can inflict upon ourselves could ever override the agenda of love to awaken us to what we fundamentally are. And the wisest way to respond to injustice, brutality, cruelty is with collective compassion. It is a call for us to function as one consciousness of love and meet that darkness with a tidal wave, a tsunami of compassion and care.
Wow. I mean, we could go down a whole trajectory of the way the world is showing up right now around that need for extending love and compassion. That is so, so powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's what compelled me to move into ministry and have a church for 10 years, trying to figure things out, and then move into chaplaincy and provide care for palliative and cancer patients and those in intensive care. And that went on for 25 years.
And it's, you know, it's if there are people who talk about purpose, I think David Maginley's name is one of the ones in the dictionary that personifies purpose, because it takes tremendous grounding in what you know you're supposed to be doing to do what you've done. I know you've mentioned that working in palliative care and hospice has a burnout rate of 5 to 7 years. And here you are tripling that, on your way to quadrupling that. And as you talked about the honor of care, it connects so strongly to your latest book, Early Exits. And what do you want to say about the honor of care and your latest book?
It's a very heavy topic.
Mm-hmm.
The full title is Early Exits, Spirituality, Mortality, and Meaning in an Age of Medical Assistance in Dying. So I found that when MAID was introduced, it fundamentally changed the nature of the dying process. And for decades, I've been with so many people as they've died and witnessed suffering, hardship, grief, heavy, difficult stuff, but equally profound beauty and mystery and love and reconciliation. Nothing breaks open the illusions of who we think we are and brings us to our raw state, like dying. And it took me a long time. I just want to note that while you say, you know, my name may be equated with knowing your purpose in life, that's not how it feels from the inside. I am bumbling along as much as anyone else. And I've made plenty of mistakes and, tried to learn from all of them. What I have concluded is that MAID is a cultural mistake. And
That's a
here's...
radical statement, David.
It is, in one way. But let's remember the facts. The vast majority of MAID requests are done not because of physical suffering, but because of existential distress. The research is conclusive in that, not only from Canada, but from the Netherlands, where it's been practiced for decades. Existential distress is, I mentioned, that which threatens the integrity of one's identity. So who you are is eroded, and how you are is eroded in the world by the dying process. You don't like it. You fear the suffering of the dying process that you are imagining is going to come. You dread the burden of care and the grief that your family is going through. You are resisting instinctively how you cannot be who you are in the way that satisfies your personal identity, called your ego. You don't like this happening. Okay, really understandable. And so when you are offered MAID, right, now your death is placed in the hands of a professional who, through a simple injection, will stop your heart. So that's very comforting to the ego identity, right? And I really want to emphasize, I'm not saying the ego is a bad thing. It's the part of me I enjoy the most.
Oh, really?
In our culture that emphasizes autonomy and the identity of the individual, it's no surprise that MAID has got so much public support. However, what most people, including advocates, the general public, those who looked at and passed the legislation, palliative care professionals, doctors, everyone, I'm using a general term, but the vast majority of people don't realize that there is a fundamental psychospiritual dynamic that is being interrupted and derailed by euthanizing, which means a good death, right? Euthanizing an individual. So I hope this is tracking with you and your listeners. MAID, because existential distress is driving the request, MAID is the ultimate act of ego self-preservation in the face of a process that naturally deconstructs it to calibrate your consciousness to the final stage of human development, which is transformation and transcendence. This is not some lofty, mystical stage of consciousness reserved only for the elite and the special ones. It is practically universal, as evidenced by the vast majority of people as they die having nearing death awareness, right? So that's an expansion of consciousness in which they can perceive to their welcoming party, and they're filled with peace, and there is a perplexing equanimity about dying. It is also a refusal to enter the wilderness period, which is temporary, but sure doesn't feel that way when you're going into it. This is why the book is over 500 pages long. I go in depth on how ego identity is constructed through 4 stages at the early part of life, and then deconstructed through 4 stages in the reverse order at the end of life. I'm going to pause there. Is this making sense so far?
It is making sense, David. And the thought that's coming to me is the tree. It's like, are we interfering with crossing that line? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if there is a moral weight to this error, it remains with us on this side of the grass. I am not saying that MAID affects the state of your consciousness in the afterlife, because that's beyond my scope of practice.
Gotcha.
However, and I'm trusting that the grace of God that receives us is infinitely greater than the grace or the compassion that we feel is sending the people. However, if MAID is the ultimate act of preserving control and perceived safety in the face of a process that requires and naturally results in a state of surrender, which is far beyond acceptance. And we're not talking about giving up. We're talking about giving yourself to this process of life that brings you into the world and takes you up. Mm-hmm. If this becomes the ultimate act to preserve control, then I actually believe, I wonder if it delays the homework that we still have to do, and then we have to face that on the other side. I don't know. I'm going to ask my boss when I get there. Uh,
Excuse me.
I got a lot of questions.
Now we have a label, the boss, the boss.
Right.
Well, I
Well,
love that you're staying open and curious about it. And I've lost both my parents, which I find a strange term in and of itself. I've lost them. But sometimes we're more comfortable saying that than saying that they died, which I also find very interesting. And you have something to say about that as well.
oh yes, because you didn't lose them.
No,
They only changed form.
exactly.
When you have a near-death experience, it feels much more like you woke up
Mm,
than you fell asleep.
mm, mm.
And so much research shows that you continue to be connected to those you love. And so that's why, this is present through all cultures. Don't dismiss it as ancestral worship, right? The saints and nothing is ever lost. They're all connected to us. Even those who, well, I just want to back up a little bit. I know some of your listeners may be saying, well, how on earth could I be against MAID in a case of Alzheimer's or dementia? I mean, to endure that. Well, my mother did endure that. And it went on for about 3 years. And it was brutal. I know it. And yet it was really profound and enriching for us as a family. Now, we're a pretty good functioning family, so we were able to come together. And I know that's not always the case. I know it's devastating and so hard for many people. And I speak from a place of privilege. I acknowledge this, right? But I've supported thousands of people through suffering into death. So I appreciate the other side of the coin. Interesting research shows that those with dementia and Alzheimer's who you seem to have lost mentally but are still there physically. Interesting research now shows that they have moved into a higher state of consciousness and even communication. It may be telepathic. They may be experiencing a community and an identity that we are incapable of comprehending. And if you want to dive into that, I encourage you to listen to the telepathy tapes and all the seasons and the discussion sessions after I think it's series 2, exploring Alzheimer's and telepathy. Utterly groundbreaking, astonishing, hope-filled that we are pure consciousness and we're all connected naturally.
I get that. I get that, and I'm thinking of, I think it was Nancy Reagan, not Nancy Reagan, Ronald Reagan's wife. Yeah, Nancy.
Yeah, it was Nancy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She wrote the book, The Long Goodbye, about his dementia, right? Yes. So even though the body and the mind appear to be disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
I think what I hear you saying is that there's so much going on at a level of consciousness and beyond ego consciousness that we cannot just dismiss what we see with our physical eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's think of it. It is a good reality check to realize that MAID has developed in a culture that emphasizes the individual, personal autonomy, which are both cultural mythologies that we operate on, in an age when people live 2 to 3 times longer than ever in history, thanks to the advent of penicillin, antibiotics, and such. Through most of human history, people have died in their 30s. Most people. So we need to appreciate that. We're living longer into disease process than ever before. Medical technology enables us to do that to an even greater extent. But MAID sees death as a problem instead of a mystery, a problem to be fixed. MAID is an effort to curtail suffering to come. I'm arguing that that suffering calls on us to make wise medical choices, such as staying ahead of pain and not chasing it, taking your pain medications when you should.
I heard that when I had my hip surgery. Very common.
Yeah,
Stay
don't be
ahead
a
of the
hero.
pain. Pardon?
Don't be a hero, right?
Yes, exactly. Don't wait till the pain's so intense that you can't deal with it. Yeah.
No. And also, it's a call on us to come together as community, to channel our resources and finances at a federal and provincial level into palliative care, and really, really lift it up. Only about 30% of Canadians have access to palliative care, and the quality of that care is not being adequately measured. The World Health Organization and the vast majority of countries in the world say that MAID is not part of palliative care. Not at all. In Canada, I think it's about 5% of people die by MAID. That may sound low, but it's among the highest amongst all the countries where it is practiced.
And I think it's increasing. It's increasing in Canada, right? It's gaining in favor. So how, we're talking at a level of honoring the suffering. How do we do that, David, when we're swimming in it? When our own grief at the process and the length of it. And, I can confess when my dad was dying that it was like, when is this going to be over? My mother had a very beautiful, peaceful death, but my dad didn't. And I remember having the thought as I was holding him, when is this going to end? So how do we swim in that pool of suffering?
My mom took 3 years. Maybe it was 4. It felt like an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
So many days I cried and wept. So many days I asked God to take her. I asked, why can't she die? Don't do this to her, right? And God's not doing it to her. That's the poverty of my words, trying to put handles on the chaos.
I agree with you there. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I want to blame someone.
Yes. And God doesn't mind. It's okay to blame.
No,
He,
right?
her, it, whatever. But go ahead.
Right. Every moment of her illness was calling us to be more and more deeply present and not turn away from what is and what we could do. What we became through those years was not something our rational mind could imagine or comprehend. It was a matter of the heart and of the soul. And we're still unpacking all of that. Mom and I actually had a conversation about MAID. She said to me, I talked to the doctor about that thing you're writing about. I said, oh? She says, yeah, I mean, they should just put me down like our dog. Wouldn't that be kind? I understood. Because I've been with about a dozen MAID procedures. I've been there. They appear very kind. But we're not talking about kindness. We're talking about a depth and a mystery that the words kindness and compassion, they don't touch. Mom didn't have MAID because she had dementia and so didn't have competency. And I'm the professional who deals with this day in and day out. So I knew the implications. And yes, there were times I wished I didn't wish, I wondered, would it have been better? But now looking back from this vantage point, I accept what is and what was, and the astonishing beauty and moments of mystery and connection that happened over those years. And then after she died, she, like so many souls, had a little mischief, had a little fun with us, with after-death communication.
Tell us more.
Oh, this is so common. I really want to assure your readers or your listeners, it's really common. Trust it. And I say that as a Christian pastor, right? I'm a Lutheran pastor. Telepathy is real. After-death communication is real. Tons of evidence. I'm on the board of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. Does research on this. Good research. So links in the video. My sister, after the funeral, did what Mom would do. She was so swallowed in grief. She piled the kids in the car and drove to the Cape Breton Highlands to go camping. And but she couldn't stop crying as she drove on the highway. And then the phone rang and it showed up on the car, the screen, right? Phone rang. And it was Mom's name, which is not in my sister's telephone, not one of the contacts. In fact, the phone at the house was registered under my sister's name. But the phone rang and there was Mom, her name. So she reached out to answer it and it went dead. And there was no record of it in the recent calls, the call history. So if that wasn't weird enough, it happened again. And this time my sister picked up her telephone and took a photograph of the screen showing Mom's name. There have been many other synchronicities and whispers from the other side, from both my mom and my dad. My dad, as he died, reached up after hours of unconsciousness. He suddenly woke and sat up in bed, which was astonishing, and reached up with joy on his face and said, "Yes, yes, come." And he named people who have died. And then he sank back down. And in the morning, he died with us all around him with great love.
Mm. Mm.
We dread death. I understand.
The ego dreads death.
Yeah, the
You
ego
mentioned
does.
the ego consciousness. It's the ego that dreads the death of the body.
Yeah.
But you've articulated so well that this is not who we really are. That's what I'm hearing. This is not who we really are. We exist at a level of consciousness beyond this physical space that we think we're in.
But that's not going to be embedded in our cultural identity in a world that says material reality is all that there is.
Yeah.
In a scientific paradigm that demands proof, which means scientific method and repetition and verification.
Yeah.
Love and consciousness never never answers to the prayer of encore. Do it again the same way.
Mm.
Does not function on the level of rational consciousness. Let's go deeper. Let's grow up. Let's wake up. So in my book, every chapter begins with a real case, then explores the psycho-spiritual dynamics of ego defenses at play, the nature of grief, of suffering, of the unfinished love story, of the assignment before us, how to meet existential distress with wisdom, compassion, awareness, and I give tools, methodology. Every chapter ends with an exercise for you to practice, so you can prepare for your trip,
For your journey. Awesome.
Yeah, do your homework now.
Prepare. I took this off LinkedIn this morning, where you've stated dying is often devastating, but there is a way to wisely navigate the road we all must travel, which is a wonderful period to what you've just talked about and what you've just stated. You give us tools. So David is here as our guide to educate, inspire, and help us transcend the thinking that is so indoctrinated, programmed. We're programmed to believe in many ways that death is the end, first of all, that it's to be avoided at all costs. And yet, maybe if you're near and you want to protect how it's done, then we use MAID for that. So,
Yeah.
David, I saw on one of your YouTube videos, you probably didn't see this, but somebody commented, "Make this man Pope." Yes, yes. So you're the wrong faith, but I would say that you're a universal faith, that it just so happens that somehow you became a Lutheran pastor, and we could talk about that maybe at another time. But I want to thank you for your eloquence in taking these what some might consider complex ideas and complex philosophies and communicating them in such a loving, compassionate way and with so much humility that, you're saying you're not part of an elite, you're not unusual, this is a universal experience. But I don't know, I hope everyone that listens to this conversation is as touched by who you are and how you're showing up in the world. It really, I know why you're still here. You're here for this very reason. And I want to thank you so much, David, for this, again, beautiful, beautiful conversation, and for sharing your insights so eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila, for the opportunity. And I encourage people to focus on your love, because love really is your spiritual practice. I hope that what we've discussed deepens your conversations. And I look forward to reading the comments and hearing some feedback. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.